Hey, welcome to this history science masterclass from Mr. Salagaras. Today we're going to learn about acids and carbonates. Okay, so it's probably a good place to start by looking at what a carbonate is. Carbonates are compounds composed of both carbon and oxygen atoms that are bonded together. An example of this is CO3 with one atom of carbon and three atoms of oxygen bonded together. So when carbonates combine with some metals such as sodium or calcium, they form a base compound such as calcium carbonate, which is contained in chalk. Another example is sodium hydrogen carbonate, NaHCO2, or bicarb soda. Another name for that is baking soda. Okay, so here's some images of those two things there. So on the left I've got bicarb soda, on the right I've got chalk. Okay, so when an acid reacts with a base carbonate, the reaction produces bicarb soda, carbon dioxide, as well as a salt and water. This is a general formula in orange that would be great to know when you're trying to identify whether a chemical formula is an acid-carbonate reaction. So the general formula goes like this, where you've got an acid and it reacts with a carbonate, so that's the little plus, and an arrow means produces a salt, and then water, and also carbon dioxide. So a salt in chemistry doesn't necessarily mean the stuff you put on your chips. A salt just refers to what's left over from this reaction that's not water and carbon dioxide. That's a simple way of explaining it. Okay, so an example of this happening is when I've got an acid-carbonate reaction when acid reacts with chalk. You can have a look at this equation here. I'll use the word one first, then talk about the chemical one after that. So when sulfuric acid reacts with calcium carbonate, that's what the plus means, reacts, produces is the little arrow, calcium sulfate, water, and carbon dioxide. I know this is an acid-carbonate reaction because according to my general formula, I've got an acid, that's the sulfuric acid, calcium carbonate being the carbonate, react with each other to produce calcium sulfate is the salt, then I produce water, and I've also got carbon dioxide. So that fits that general equation on the previous slide. So that looks pretty complicated when you write it out in a chemical equation. So to identify whether it is an acid-carbonate reaction, a general rule of thumb is to look for the acid at the start. See if you can find the calcium carbonate, so the CO, somewhere next to the acid before the arrow, and then try and look for the H2O and the CO2 in the products. Okay, some other acid carbonates reactions are these. So when you've got acid and calcium carbonate reacting, you can notice it quite physically in a lot of structures, particularly in Europe where you've got buildings made out of things like sandstone or limestone, that those structures can be eroded away from things like acid rain. So you've got that image there of a lady's face that's been eaten away. It's not actually a lady's face, it's a statue of a lady whose face has been eaten away because of the acid in the rain has broken down the carbonates that make up that stone. Okay, here's another example of where I've got an acid-carbonate reaction. This time we're using the acid vinegar reacting with bicarb soda. This is a really groovy one to do when you're making your little volcanoes and stuff like that. So ethanoic acid is the scientific name for vinegar. When it reacts with sodium hydrogen carbonate, produces sodium acetate, water, and carbon dioxide. So if you look at your general formula again, you've got an acid reacting with the carbonate, producing a salt, which is the sodium acetate, the water, and the carbon dioxide. The chemical formula for this is quite complicated, so once again, just look for the general formula and how that applies to that. Okay, these are some diagrams of it, some very groovy ones. I love to do this reaction myself. Okay, so here's a great table to use when you're looking for looking to identify those types of reactions in chemical formulas or in word formulas. So probably refer back to that one in the future. Okay, hey, thanks for watching. Make sure you go back through these slides, make notes, ask questions, and most importantly, go back and watch it again if there's a point that you missed. Like my channel, like the video, subscribe to my channel, and make sure you stay tuned for the next video in this series.